Hi everyone, welcome back. This is lecture 23, part 1, casual gaming. So we'll take a quick look at sort of an overview of what casual gaming is, and this is the era when it sort of exploded. Remember, we're talking about the time frame of 2005 to 2012. So what makes a game casual? What's the difference between a casual game and a regular game or a traditional game? And where do we find these casual games? Casual gaming is all the time, it's everywhere. Casual games are generally playable on most platforms: PCs, mobile phones, game consoles, Facebook, web browsers. Pretty much anything with a screen can have a casual game on it. Generally, these games, what sort of differentiates from the traditional PC and console games is that they are smaller and they're basically less technologically intense, right? These games don't require you to have the latest Xbox or the latest PlayStation or the fastest PC video card. They basically are smaller games. They're less technologically intensive because then they can be ported to every possible platform. Casual games also cost less to develop than traditional games, and they can have a faster development cycle. So this lets game developers in this who work in this field make their games more frequently or update them more frequently. And a casual game is really designed to be accessible. It is aimed at a mass audience, right? If you're a hardcore World of Warcraft player or a FPS person who play a lot of Fortnite or Call of Duty, sports player who does a lot of Madden or FIFA or NBA 2K, these games are not necessarily aimed at you or the person who really likes 40-hour JRPGs or 100 hours open world games. These are just aimed at everybody. They are designed to be easily accessible, right? They have less complex control schemes. It doesn't require 5 years of muscle memory to be able to play a game of Angry Birds, right? You just pick up your phone, you drag the little catapult thing, you throw the bird, you break some blocks, you're good to go. Temple Run, any of those like little match three tile games, all this stuff works on these principles. So these games have generally very easy to access controls. The gameplay is very simple and intuitive. This is an example of that sort of Nintendo Wii Blue Ocean idea that we want to make gaming accessible to everybody, where you just do things that relate to things you do in real life very easily, and just taken to sort of the extreme of, can you draw your finger this way, then you can play this game. These games don't require a large time commitment to learn to play right. If you want to play a game of Assassin's Creed Odyssey or Red Dead Redemption 2 on a current game console, you better be prepared to spend 30 to 100 hours at a minimum, right? There's a lot of complex control. They use all the buttons. These games are designed to be played in little chunks, 20, 30 minutes, 5 minutes while you're waiting in line, and have very simple control schemes. They're usually available on multiple platforms. Unlike console exclusives or high end PC gaming, these games are really designed to be on as many systems as possible. The casual market is so big simply because it has access to so many potential consumers, right? That's the whole point. These games also generally cost a little bit less than a traditional game. So instead of paying $60 for the latest and greatest Animal Crossing or Doom Eternal, I can pay $2 for a copy of Angry Birds on my iPhone. Or a lot of times, free to play is how these games make their money. So a casual game is aimed at a mass audience. It's designed to be easily accessible. If you identify yourself as a gamer, these generally aren't the games that are marketed directly to you. You might play them and enjoy them, but that you're not the key market for this. These games rely almost entirely on digital distribution simply because the economics of these games don't make physical releases really feasible, particularly since so many of them are on the iPad and the tablets and the Amazon Fire tablet, for example, the mobile phones, PC, even on the game consoles. These are almost always distributed simply because they are the economics don't work for physical media to be produced. They are an example of the long tail. A casual game can sell for years and years and years across multiple platforms. So again, it's a pretty robust market. There are several companies that focused primarily on casual games this year. PopCap was one. Zynga that we'll talk about. They leverage Facebook games. They're the people behind Farmville and a lot of games like that. A lot of new and smaller companies focus on this market because it's got less startup costs. You can turn around your games faster. You can make more games for less money, essentially. And the potential market for these games is huge. You're talking about anyone with a smartphone, which is like well over a billion people at any given moment who could potentially be your customer. So these games have a wide, I mean, the net is very wide. This is why this is now the biggest part of the gaming industry, right? If there are a billion people with iPhones and you sell to 0.05%, that's 500 million copies sold of your game. Or if it's free to play, it's 500 million downloads that you can try to make money off of in that model. A lot of the larger publishers now have a casual games label, or they've bought some of these games. EA Play for EA, for example, bought out PopCap. Activision has purchased King, so it's clear that this is a big part of the gaming industry, and it's actually now bigger than the traditional console market. These games have a little bit different revenue structure than traditional console games. There's the traditional, pay once, own the game, give me $4, here's your copy of Angry Birds. Some of these companies have enough of a catalog of games, of these casual style games, that they offer subscription services, right? Give me $4 a month or $5 a month, and here's access to 20 games on your phone or tablet. So that's become more popular. There's also subscriptions to a series of games, narrative games like the Telltale, Walking Dead games, things like this will give you a bonus if you subscribe to all the episodes instead of buying them one at a time. And then the most popular model in this genre is probably the freemium or free to play. The game itself costs nothing to download, but oftentimes the player has to pay to either advance or have access to more tools in the game. And we'll talk more about that specifically here in just a second. So the mobile casual gaming, particularly on the phones and tablets, really, this is sort of the biggest slice of the market is these freemium or free-to-play games. It's a popular model for casual and social games with there, so things like Clash of Clans, Draw Something. There are several examples, but this can be controversial because gameplay can actually be engineered or designed to make payments critical to progress or to obscure how much money you're actually spending and what you're getting for that money when you make these purchases. So in the example over here, which is the Smurfs example, the Smurf Village was a Capcom published game that was just a little Sim City style builder game where you built Smurf Village, right? Kids love Smurfs. They're little blue people 3 apples high. They're a big popular cartoon in the 80s, all that stuff. But this game was very popular with children. One of the reasons your iPhones now you have to put a password in when you want to make a purchase is because prior to that, Capcom would sell these Smurf berries, which are the main resource of the game, and kids would just buy, click the thing, and because the credit cards are attached, parents were getting these credit card bills for hundreds of dollars of Smurf berries that their kids were using to make their awesome Smurf village. And that was an example of sort of the transparency, right? Where the parents were like, what is happening? Why am I getting charged $500 over this nonsense? And this sort of spurned Apple to put that security feature in. Another example of transparency is where you'll buy a virtual currency, gems or coins or energy or whatever it is, and they'll design the store in such a way that you'll always have some left over from every purchase, but not enough that you can't buy. Not enough left over that you can buy anything else. You have to buy more gems to get more stuff. So there's some real transparency issues in how these purchases are being leveraged. Draw Something is more of an example of progress. So Draw Something is a game where I draw a picture of something like Darth Vader or I don't know, a fruit basket or whatever it was, and then someone else would try to guess. And in the free version, you only have 4 or 5 colors and 3 or 4 pencils to use, and then you could pay a couple bucks here, a couple bucks there to get a lot more colors or more pens. Some games would do this with resource management. There'll be a critical resource like energy or water or something, and every day for free you can have 4 units of water. But if you just want to give us a couple bucks, we'll give you 20 units of water, and you can get your farm really going or build your cool catapult or whatever you're trying to do. So there's a lot of critique of this is that this is really not free to play. This is really pay to win. In some cases, the way these games are being designed. This isn't true across the board, but it is a criticism of this style of model for revenue from games. And this model is now being adopted more frequently in the PC space. You see it with things like Fortnite, which is one of probably the most biggest game in the world the past year or two. A lot of other free to play games. So we'll talk a little bit about the difference. On mobile, it was originally sort of seen as kind of had a negative connotation. I think they've sort of gotten away from that a little bit as they've figured out better ways to find a balance between the free and the things you pay for. But we'll see how this evolves. But again, the free to play is so alluring because again, you get 500 million downloads, you sell to 1%, that's 5 million, or you get and you sell to 1% of those people, that's 5 million sales a day, right? It can be very, very lucrative in free to play. Social gamings are games implemented through a social network like Facebook. This at one point there were more social networks, but essentially Facebook is the one that really leverages this games. So they try to get your friends to play, and they give you a free resource to progress your game, or you both get bonuses when you play together. And then you get more friends to play, and you get more bonuses. And this model is also available on mobile phones and web browsers. But this was a pretty big market in itself. It was about $6 billion in 2013 estimated. So this is sort of leveraging your Facebook network to generate revenue. Zynga is probably the most notorious and famous company this era, particularly on Facebook. They're the people behind Farmville and some other games. Um, they leverage the Facebook friends to get more people to play. All their games are essentially freemium. They were heavily criticized at times for basically copying other people's games design and figuring out a way to monetize them really quickly, and then use the social network to sort of pull in more players. But when they went public initially, they had a valuation higher than Electronic Arts, which is sort of mind-boggling because Electronic Arts at one point was the world's third largest published game publisher. They're a well-established game company that's been around since the 80s, and yet Zynga was seen by investors as more valuable because of the sheer size of the casual game market. Now, they're not up there where they were a few years ago, but they do still exist, and they do still do make games in this space. Episodic gaming is yet another distribution model, and we sort of alluded to this in the subscription section. Games are sold in episodes, so that some that have directly connected plots, others are sort of standalone. These were designed essentially for shorter gaming sessions. Partially, this reflects changing gamer demographics, right? People who grew up with games in the 70s and 80s are now in their late 30s and early 40s, and you just don't have the time to game that you had when you were younger. So rather than try to sell me a $60 game that runs 40 hours that I'll never have time to play, they'll say, "Hey, why don't you buy, episode 1 and episode 2, and these each only take a couple of hours, and if you play through all 4 or 5 episodes, you'll have like a good 10, 12-hour game." So there's a nice bite-sized gaming approach. And again, these games tend to not be as mechanically complex as a traditional game, though in some cases, like Half-Life 2, Episode 1 and 2, that's actually Half-Life just split into smaller pieces. But these games traditionally are a little less expensive, or excuse me, these games are less expensive than traditional games. You can also try them out for a low price, right? They often give away the first episode for free or $2 or whatever. And then if you like it, you can purchase the rest of them at a discount. And again, these almost all rely heavily on digital distribution. So a good example of this are the Telltale games, the Minecraft story mode. The Walking Dead games were very popular. They had a Game of Thrones game. Valve Software that split Half-Life Episode 2 into Episodes 1 and 2. Life is Strange is a much more recent example of this that comes out of Square Enix. So this episodic gaming idea is another idea that sort of spins out of casual gaming. So to wrap this up, casual gaming is everywhere. It is the dominant form of revenue for the game industry at this time. It's because the sheer size of it is kind of mind-boggling, honestly. And it's everywhere, right? It's on my phone, it's on my tablet, it's on my PC, it's on my game console. It's everywhere. Again, it relies heavily on digital distribution. We got a bunch of new business models out of it. And the game development for these models is a little bit different from the traditional AAA game development or console or hardcore PC games. And you see that reflected in the smaller titles and the sort of more ubiquity of them. All right, so that's it for part 1. We'll come back with part 2 and talk a little bit about PC in this era.